We may as well. I mean, people might be. I don't know if people know we're on today because obviously.
Yeah, I was wondering, did you not send a tweet out, or have you
Well,
reached your limit?
I have, but it's broken. There's one man to blame for this whole Twitter. Well, I've made notes, right? Because I mean, when I say notes, I've got like I can't read that. I've got it in front of me. You know who's to blame for breaking Twitter?
Isn't it back to normal?
Well, TweetDeck's still buggered. It's Martin Sadler, because Elon Musk has spent all this time trying to fix his account. He sent him that tweet months ago now. He's still locked out. His only communication with the world is his column in the paper. So that's cross that off the list. I may as well not bother. Welcome to the programme.
You're just giddy because Wakefield had the second win in
two
three.
wins in a row at home, yes.
And you were there?
I was there, which was very surprising. Not that I was there.
Well, that was quite surprising in itself, to be honest.
It's less than surprised that I was there. That Luke Gale was there and played. His home debut at the age of 34? Something like that.
Isn't he the same shirt number as his age, virtually?
Something like that. David Fafita is slightly younger than his squad number. And,
So have Wakefield scored more points than London Scholars yet? That's the question. 34?
I mean, you talk about
32 points they scored, yeah?
No. London Scholars 188 in 12 games. Wakefield 155.
But they do
17.
have 2 wins, and I'm assuming Scholars don't have them.
Yes. I mean, we won't be in League One next season unless there's something really goes wrong with AMG.
Grading's gone particularly wrong.
I mean, the stand's nearly done and everything. Now, the football team played a friendly day yesterday against Hallam FC. Not Hallam FM, they don't exist anymore. And they left the rugby post up, so it looked like it's some kind of weird Gaelic football hybrid with the football post in front of the rugby post. Like on the football pitch. We'll talk about the games later because we've got to do all the news, which is... Well, there's not a lot happened, has it?
No.
The RFL's lost some money, but it seems that most of it, from a cursory glance at everyone writing stories, is due to insurance costs, which have gone up because everyone's suing the sport because of this, that and the other. So
not just that they're suing the sport, but premiums have gone up in case there are claims further along the line, which is the same with your car and your house insurance. But yeah, it's doubled. The premium has doubled, which they're saying that they couldn't have foreseen. I think they would have put a contingency in there, but probably not doubling. But the worry would be that it's within a World Cup year, so it's great that more sponsors have come in on the back of the World Cup, but it doesn't look like that's going to be translated to a profitable future. There's still, obviously the television deal is going to be crucial, and we know that, well, we don't know, but it has been mentioned.
We understand.
There might be another player in the market, which again is either going to raise the value because you need a competitive market, or they could genuinely be interested in taking on the sport, which again would mean a different subscription. I guess the question for Sky then would be, how many people subscribe solely for the Rugby League would move to the Zone and keep their Sky subscription going? Would that involve a significant loss of income for Sky that would make them come back to the table and perhaps improve their bid? You wouldn't be able to see the Ashes cricket if you stopped subscribing to Sky, although there were 17 highlight programmes yesterday.
And they pretty much now release the highlights as they happen on Twitter, so... Well,
if only it was working.
On social media.
I mean, I'm not a barometer, by the way, but I'd never heard of this company, the streaming company.
They were very famous when they took Eddie Hearn's Matchroom stable away from Sky, and almost, I thought he was a shareholder in DAZN, and they were talking about innovative content and all the kind of documentary style stuff around the sporting event. So to make it 24/7 coverage, they were going to produce programmes, they were going to make personalities out of his boxers and all that kind of thing. And I think to a certain extent they've done that. But the big contract they've got is with NFL, and it's a streaming contract. So again, whilst NBC and whoever, ABC, have designated games, the rest of them are streamed through a DAZN app. He said, expected to know what the hell he was talking about, and haven't got a clue.
So I wonder whether that's whether they're
But I think what they'd be looking at is maybe Sky having the key, maybe less than 66 games, but still hiving off a package to Channel 4, hiving off a package to DAZN to do their streaming for them, which might work for all parties.
Yeah, because they're clearly looking, the RFL are clearly looking at having all 6 games available for people to watch in one form or another. So that would seem to sort of make sense that Sky say take 2 a week and
we'll give you maybe the same or slightly less, but DAZN will then give you the balance, and they probably keep something for our league as well, because they did Holland Catalan this week with dual commentary, both in English and French.
Indeed. So did you listen to the French commentary this week, like you did last week?
No, I listened to Radio Humberside because we like Mr. Stead.
They're not paying
We're big fans of Mr. Stead.
He's very good.
And I didn't have to pay $6.95 to listen to Radio Humberside.
There must be. I'm not saying there's a relationship between Sky and DAZN in the way that there obviously was between BT and the BBC, because they were very close in terms of personnel. But there must be some kind of agreement between the two, not just because there's a DAZN linear channel on the Sky now, which I don't know how many people actually know exists, but also they share the rights to the IPL. And when I say share, they're both showing it at the same time, which seems a bit of a pointless waste of time. But
content.
And we've got to realise we are just we're not quite filler content. I don't want to say we're filler content, because we're not. In the way that, say, the under-21s football championships is going on at the minute, and that's the kind of thing that Sky would have had on 25 years ago in the summer just to fill time, because they got 3 channels or whatever. But no one in this country has picked up the rights. Now, either that says no one cares about under-21 football, or no one wants to pay to show under-21 football in the middle of the summer when there's the Ashes on. Wimbledon's just started. There's a whole manner of other things that people want to do. But we are, as you say, how many people are dyed in the wool? 100%. I subscribe to Sky and have done for 30 years because the Rugby League's on there. And how many of those people will disappear? Yeah, because as much as you enjoy the cricket or the NFL or whatever,
I wouldn't subscribe if it wasn't for the Rugby League.
Well, I only subscribed for the Rugby League, and then I figured out that I was usually involved in one of the TV games. So I thought, this is rather silly.
I don't need to go.
See yourself on the telly.
And then obviously I had access to all the games because of my job, so I cancelled mine a number of years ago. And I wouldn't, if I got it back, I wouldn't watch it. So it's just, but that, again, I may not be a typical Rugby League fan. I think most people like to watch it.
And there might come a time when Harris insists on having the Disney Channel, and you might have to resubscribe. CVEBs or whatever it is. But no, I think it's an interesting dynamic that was hinted at by Rodri Jones when he gave his last briefing, that it might not look quite the same, but the amount of money in total might be more. And that's just the way the media market's going. And if it's true that DAZN are interested, then it does open up a global market as well. The one thing we do have this year is a product that it's really easy to tell a story about. That, even now that the relegation fight that we thought was over isn't. That 2 clubs are definitely involved in it, a third one now could be. The other 9 are fighting for a playoff place. And even the league leaders is open to any of the ones that are currently in the top. People can genuinely now say Lee are contenders to be league leaders. And we've never had that before, which is great. And maybe that is what we're selling to. And I do think as well that clearly a relationship with all of these people is IMG. They're content providers, they're producers of programmes. They will have a relationship with DAZN. They clearly do with Sky. They I think have been keen to promote the idea that there needs to be a terrestrial presence as well, and it's worked out that Channel 4's been very good, although even Channel 4 will admit that the gap between games in the middle of the season is too long and needs filling. I mean, we had another Friday night where we had 4 games on competing with each other. All of that needs to go, and that's why partly you need to get rid of loop fixtures, because it gives you a bit more flexibility in your calendar to say we can spread them out a little bit more, maybe take a couple of weeks, because people don't have to play on, they can play on the Sunday and not have to be required to play again on the Thursday. We can plan it a little bit better. So.
I guess the concern with Channel 4 at the moment is not that, well, we know they're not paying anything, are they?
No.
Well, but
I think they're paying production costs. They're not paying a rights fee.
But there is a cost of broadcasting
Yes.
again, and at the moment they're cutting a lot of programmes.
But IMG are providing that content as well. So
we're also cheaper than Andrew Neil probably, so that's good.
It feels like Channel 4 needs to be on it every second week, I would say.
Yes.
Really, to have that.
And the other
regular
interesting
slot.
thing to throw into the mix is that I'd be very surprised if Viaplay come
Well,
back.
that's the next thing, isn't it?
Because clearly they're in financial trouble. You only need to see the statements that they're putting out, that they're shedding high-profile staff. They're based now over in Scandinavia rather than in Ireland, where it started. There was a little bit of a link with Rugby League in the first instance, but I wouldn't be surprised when that contract runs out if they're not interested in the Championship. I don't know how many subscribers they have or what their viewing figures are, but I think you have to be an absolute diehard to want to pay a second subscription to watch Championship Rugby League. So again, if they're not in the mix, that's perhaps our league product. Because again, the Championship's a fantastic division.
Yeah, it is.
In terms of, you have no idea how this is going to... Yeah, it's a fair chance that Featherstone will finish top of the league, but you don't know if they're going to do a Toronto right at the end and there's going to be a team in for... You know, Bradford are at the moment, you wouldn't say they were out of the running in a one-off game to win promotion. At the bottom, you'd say, yeah, Newcastle look a little bit stranded, but Widnes, who dispensed with John Keir last week, are now closer to relegation than they are to the playoffs.
And London seem to be gradually getting better.
York had a fantastic result this week.
What's happened to Swinton?
Swinton,
going on there?
remarkable result again.
So you've got it. I mean, we've got plenty of things that are of value. Super League, the Championship, League One. Well, I say of value. We've got things that could have value. Super League has a value.
The results in League One this week were eye-opening.
How we can monetise the Championship, League One, Women's Super League, Wheelchair Super League, everything else, I don't know. It's interesting that DAZN have the rights to the Women's Champions League football, which they've been broadcasting on YouTube this year, so you could watch it for free. Next year they're putting it behind a paywall. So they've got some experience in doing stuff with team sport and not just boxing. I think they've got offices or studios in Leeds as well, for all the people who jumped on the Channel 4 in Leeds are going to buy Rugby League bandwagon. But people don't care because DAZN is the sexiest Channel 4, and it's in Leeds, so it's not.
And it's spelled funny as well.
It's I mean, it's nonsense name, isn't it? They're never going to get me a job now, but it's a terrible name. But it's interesting to see what happens. From my opinion, I think we need Sky because they've got lots of money. We're in a very interesting time in sports broadcasting, certainly in America, where a lot of money has been spent on rights, and now they're having to cut back on the talent on and off the screen because they spend so much on the rights. Now, I'd say we're fairly cheap sport, aren't we? We're not in the realms of the Football League, which has cost a lot of money for Sky.
I think the other thing we've got is our renowned accessibility. The thing that broadcasters would like is the fact that you can get a coach talking to pundits at the side of the pitch straight after the game. What
time did you get home from Warrington on Thursday?
Marginally sooner than Darryl Powell did his press conference. I'm joking. Darryl was it 11:10?
I mean,
I think by then we were in the roadworks.
I facetiously said 11 o'clock after the game, and I wasn't too far off. Super League need to nip that in the bud, and they've known about that problem for a long time. Yeah, so this is not a new issue for Super League, and people can easily say, "Oh, you media people, you've got nothing else better to do than sit around," which is fair.
There were some deadlines missed.
It's not good. I mean, I've been onto the operational rules because I was bored.
I was going to say it should be in the operational rules.
I couldn't find it.
If it isn't, it should be.
I had to go into the Super League Code of Conduct, which I've only got the copy of from 2020 when I had access to it through work, which I don't have the up-to-date one, but it does say post-match arrangements for non-televised games will be as follows. Now this, I assume, is the same as a TV game, just with the TV bit taken out. A media conference should take place as soon as possible after the final hooter. Well, that's not 11:10, is it? Regardless.
Not for a game that finished around about, 10 o'clock?
But they do put all the blame on the host club media manager, who should ensure the smooth running of this event. Well, it's down to the coach to actually turn up and answer 3 questions. Or send Ryan Sheridan. I know you'll probably get fined for that, but...
To be honest,
it's
and again,
poor.
he didn't say anything that you wouldn't expect him to say, or he hadn't. But Sky made a big deal about him sitting in his box when he could, which again puts extra fuel on that fire, which is unnecessary.
Was he interviewed on Sky?
I don't know, I was at the game.
Right.
I think I turned over by that point.
Yeah, because they wouldn't expect to interview the coach post-match, and if he was still sat in his box, then that would make it difficult. I didn't watch the game, unfortunately. So
I was It was hilarious, wasn't it? I mean, Phil enjoyed it.
I think he did the same the week before, because I saw a picture of somebody with Daryl Powell in the background at the back of the stand, sort of saying he's been sat there for however long. So this time it was on TV.
Again, I just think it sends out an extra message that you don't need at this time, and he knows that. I mean, he's not doing it maybe deliberately.
Well, I don't know whether he
but
isn't,
it puts
because
extra pressure on
your
team, doesn't it?
You know as well as anybody else that if you're a coach, you are going to be shown on Sky probably every 5th minute.
Yeah,
I mean, it's ridiculous how many times they show the coaches, and so they know the camera's on them, and they place water bottles in strategic positions to get the advertising. Coaches play up to the camera because they know they can see themselves on the screen. So let's not pretend that he doesn't know why he's doing it. I think it must be a conscious decision.
Poor old Kieran Cunningham now, all I think about him is with his headphones.
But is that
he was the great one of the great hookers of all time?
Is it a tactic to keep the pressure on himself and not on his team? Or, I'm not sure.
I just think it ramps up the pressure on the club.
Possibly, yeah.
And it clearly it just isn't working for them at the moment. And it doesn't mean that the season's a write-off. They're in the they've slipped to fourth on points difference, and they've got a really tough game at St Helens this week, and then I think they go to Catalan the week after.
Well, the worst thing is it's not even at St Helens this week according to the paper, it's at home, so they're even more pressure because the fans hate them and go boo all the time.
Which again, if the fans are going to boo, which doesn't help because the team aren't playing in terms of their league position as badly as a couple of the performances have been recently, and whilst fans have every right to boo, it's just again exacerbating the issue. You're not going to turn that around by not facing them.
No, true, but I mean, I don't get the booing thing. I don't get it at all, and I never did. You know, when I used to go watch Juju as a child, and I never understood people leaving early. We would never leave early. We would never boo, because it's not constructive.
No.
I appreciate people say, "Oh well, I paid my money, I'm entitled to," and I get that, but I'm not sure how that is going to improve.
It's perspective as well. You know, that you don't overcheer when you win 8 games at the beginning of the season. You enjoy it. You don't boo when you lose 5 out of 6 games in the middle of the season, because there's always going to be a period where you can't keep that level of intensity. You're going to get injuries. Absolutely. The other thing that I hadn't realised was quite so obvious until I saw them this week was that they've lost 2 very important forwards for different reasons. But clearly Thomas McKaylee either had a better offer or wasn't settled and decided to go home, and Josh Maguire again dragged on a little bit, but they can't have ever assumed at the start of the season that those 2 players wouldn't be a major part of their armoury. You take 2 big forwards out by the time you're getting into 2/3 into the season, and you can't rotate in the way that you'd want to. And I mean, Paul Vaughan has been a fantastic overseas signing, but he isn't playing at the moment as well as he was playing at the beginning, because if he was in Sydney, he'd virtually have finished his season by now. He's not used to playing this amount of games in that short space of time. But they can't give him a rest for a week because they've lost 2 of their big name forwards. They had another one suspended this week. James Harrison was out. So that's not mitigating. But when you get that, look at Salford over the past couple of weeks. They've had 3 of their best players who all play in the spine unavailable, and 2 of their worst results. Yeah. Why would you boo when Warrington could still win the grand final?
I've got to ask about George Williams.
I don't think they will.
No, George Williams is obviously a very good player.
He's a very good player.
But he can't be the reason that they've suddenly dropped off. And I still can't understand why Stefan Ratchford, who has played stand-up in the past, hasn't he? He's definitely played stand-up in the past. Hasn't played stand-up. Well, they're sticking anyone to play there. Dowell will be playing there next week.
Actually, Ryan Sheridan would be a good bet. But no, I think Williams is a huge miss. And clearly, if you do take the person that runs your team out of a side, why are some teams playing better at the moment? Possibly even the team that beat Warrington on Thursday, because they've got their 2 first choice halfbacks.
It's just always the way teams go up and down through the season.
But
it's very rare.
You picked up Luke Gale.
He's back.
Well, you've got a halfback whose the ability is to direct a team around the pitch. Will Dagger is suddenly playing probably some of the best rugby of his career because he's got a guy inside him who's doing all the organising. And suddenly Wakefield look a different team. So Warrington fans, and I wouldn't dream of telling them how they should support their team, but also have to be aware of the fact that when you do take some key elements out, you're not going to be as dominant as you were at the beginning. I thought the cup tie set them back. I don't think they've recovered from that.
Paul
because they needed to win a big game, and they had every opportunity to win that one, and to not create enough chances with a man up for 74 minutes. I think that put that huge question mark over the heads of everybody at the club. But the answer is not to boo the players who are doing it tough at the moment.
Thanks for all your comments during the week. I was much amused by Martin, who's always on the comments, talking about the South Stand abusing refs in Yiddish in the 1920s. So I was very, very amused.
I don't know if they were abusing. There were certainly songs sung.
Oh, well, I may have got misread. I may have misread that. Paul apologised for turning up late. We were slightly early, so it's okay. Phil says he'd happily cancel Sky if DAZN took over Rugby League coverage. Some great boxing content on it. Think they'd do the same if they took on League. Paul was interviewed by Jenna before the coverage ended at midnight. And Phil also says it makes a change from booing the refs. I think I always used to boo the opposition.
Yeah, but
there was video footage of me booing Bright Sods.
I mean, it's not just that. I understand there were people sort of gesticulating behind the match official on the game at each end, and that's happened before with me on the BBC. I think I did a BBC game, Warrington against Wigan, I think it was, and I think it was some Wigan fans going be straight over my shoulder. You know, you're doing the usual signs that you can possibly imagine. I mean, that's not a great look for the sport, and certainly as a club, I think the club need to tackle that issue. It does not a good look for the club. I just think I don't know. It's clearly, it can't be all the supporters in the ground, can it? It must be a minority.
It was obvious at full time that it wasn't one section of the ground. It was quite noticeable, and I think you've also got to give the opposition some credit that the first game of the season was a statement game for Warrington. In the first half, they were faultless. This game, pretty much Leeds were faultless in the first half. They scored 16 points in 15 minutes, which was the platform for ultimate victory. But the manner in which they played, and the fact that I was looking at the stats, don't tell you everything. We always say that they're an indication. That they're not a reason necessarily why. If somebody intercepts and goes 100 metres, they're going to have a lot of good running meters. But the Leeds backs combined made over 700 metres, and I couldn't remember looking at stats, seeing a combined total that high. There will have been, somebody will know that, but that's because suddenly they've got two wingers playing who are taking the pressure off the forwards with the runs they're making out of the backfield. They've got their two first choice halfbacks feeding off each other, and a fullback then coming into the line who is assisting virtually every try that's being scored at the moment. Nanny MacDonald came back in. Louis Roberts is learning his trade, but Nanny MacDonald is an experienced international, and his ball carrying out of defence is pretty exceptional. And you have to pay credit to that for putting Warrington on the back foot. And again, fans burn off their own team don't take into account that it might have had something to do with how well the opposition played.
And Leeds pretty much started how they finished the week before, didn't they? They carried on with that sort of momentum, with that confidence.
Which is exactly what they did this time last year. As was pointed out to
Book the coach to Old Trafford. Book it now.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, of course, now you've got those half-back partners back. No, they're not for this week.
Yeah.
Austin's banned. So.
Well, unless he appeals.
Well done, Liam Watts, who's back in front of the beak, so well done to him.
Well, he did have a week without. So
well done to Liam Watts. Well, a lot of players touching referees this week, according to the...
a couple of cautions.
I saw Cameron Smith touch the referee in the Leeds game.
Was that when they...
He was lining up defensively, and I think, you steady yourself, you put your hands out, and you realise you've touched the referee. I think that's why it's a caution rather than...
There have been charges in the past where I've wondered where the charges come from. Because there are examples where you think, hang on a minute, something, was that deliberate or not? I mean, you don't know because you're looking the other way, so you as a referee can't deal with it. But some of them, I think, are just accidental, but I think some are probably avoidable. I haven't seen the contacts for what the
I think, again, a fine is probably better than a ban at this stage. But
I tell you, if you are ever bored, the RFL operation of rules, as mentioned earlier, well worth look for what you can get fined for. £15,000 for having kids on the pitch in an RFL event. Not the dancing ones.
Yeah, it's always a hot topic there after a game to avoid that. Whereas you look back at like the NRL Grand Final, I think families are on the pitch and it's just completely different.
Dennis Wise's fault, which Leeds fans will tell you about, Leeds United fans would agree with. Because he was the first one to take I think it was his son up to collect the FA Cup, and thus a tradition started. Bang kids.
Just generally.
Yeah. Tim says, sorry, 22 minutes late, staff difficulties at Hampton Wick, one for the teenagers. Cheers, Tim. You don't have to tell us if you like. You can just turn up. It doesn't matter.
Anyone who quotes Reggie Perrin is fine by me.
Fine. Not the remake. That was a bit rubbish, but the original.
There was no need for a remake.
No. Sunshine desserts. Well, we've got tons of caramel wafers. You still haven't sponsored the programme. Anything more to say about Leeds and Warrington? I know we kind of wandered into this from the miasma that was.
You see, you took script and we
wandered
wandered into it.
Script, a bad joke about Martin Sadler and then wiring crisis. I was on the bus and I thought, I'll write some things down. I don't know why. I mean, so Leeds are back. Warrington,
not necessarily. Leeds' next two fixtures are Salford and Hull KR, which happen to be the two teams that are above them. So it's
but having said that,
period.
obviously Salford lost at the weekend, and Hull KR were miserable really at Leeds. So they're struggling with injuries, aren't they? So you probably fancy Leeds in those two games.
I also think that we've all been sitting here going, Lee, first objective attained. They're not going to get relegated. Fantastic. And like every week we're coming back going, they've won again. They looked so good on Friday night, even though, what was Mikey Lewis doing?
Has he been charged?
I
missed that one.
He's not been charged. He's got, I think, again, a caution.
I was blown away at half time with Jordan Abdul, because I thought Jordan Abdul's absolutely
just thrown his teammate under
the bus, the double-decker bus coming hurtling towards him, and he's under it. Because he just said, he's done it. Like, he didn't suggest it was a slip. Yeah. So I thought, well, this is going to be a probable charge here. I thought the referee and the match officials handled it sensibly, because they could sin bin on the basis he delayed the restart.
But what was he doing?
Saved a decision.
Because again, at the start of a game, you've gone out, you've told your team, this is how we want you to approach maybe the first 3 sets of 6. First of all, your kick-off goes out on the full, and then you exacerbate that with totally need. I mean, I have to pay credit to Tom Briscoe. He could have been more seriously injured. He certainly could have stayed down while he assessed whether he was.
If it had been football, he'd have been rolling all over.
Is that in the spirit of rugby league? He's rolling around on the floor in the spirit of rugby league?
It wasn't in the spirit. The challenge wasn't in the spirit of rugby league. But it just seemed a mindless act. And we know he's talented. We say it every time we see him. He's got a great try, but you can't do that and then expect your team to.
Well, I can only determine if match review panel have not charged. They must have determined it was accidental. I don't know. The angle from behind the post, I didn't think he had slipped, to be honest. But
he had ample time not to make contact.
I know it was very wet, but anyway.
But from that moment, Hull KR were destined not to win that game.
Yeah, they couldn't do anything right, could they? I suppose the second half, I was only half watching it. The game was over, really, wasn't it?
Well, but the other credit to Lee then is that how many games have we seen where the opposition have gone out to 12 that they've been the better team, and Lee ensured that they weren't. And Pape again brilliant, Lamb again brilliant.
They play some attractive rugby as well, don't they?
They do.
Yeah,
they do.
They're going to be more annoyed that they conceded. More than anything else.
I don't think they were that annoyed because they went second on points difference and they're above Wigan. So.
Well, yeah, I saw Andy Burnham jumping on the bandwagon on Twitter.
He was the former MP for Lee, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, but I know MPs and rugby league, I don't trust them. Do not trust them. She's Dame now. I don't know if that's to do with getting a stadium, but Dame Andrew.
She won't be there for much longer.
No, thank God. Is there a spirit of rugby league? Do we have any kind of moral code that we decided to invent as kind of covering over the cracks of racism and sexism and everything else? That
family sport.
Family sport, it is.
Which doesn't.
We do have one. Yeah, we do. Oh, rugby league. The rugby league family. The rugby league family comes together, Phil, in times of.
It does.
Rugby league is a family game.
But it isn't a panacea.
Rugby league is a family game.
I think we're not here to talk cricket, nor should we perhaps. But
Johnny Bairstow's tackle on the protester, good. Johnny Bairstow getting stumped, not good. Leeds Rhinos didn't send a tweet out about that.
But also, if you want a winning mentality, look at the Aussies. It's sport.
A win.
You win. This is the Ashes. It doesn't matter whether they're pragmatic. They appear to be 2-0 up. Isn't that what sports?
And
about?
their previous cheating, the underarm gave us the great Richie Beno rant, which is one of the great pieces of sports broadcasting. And cricket certainly needs someone like Richie Beno these days.
Anyway, we're not talking about it.
No, we're not. So there's no spirit of rugby league, so that's good. So we can't claim some kind of moral high ground like they do in rugby union. And then, well, that's all taken apart, isn't it, fairly quickly?
But you can't in professional sport.
Yeah, because it's all about winning. If Wakefield won every game 1-0 and stayed up, okay. So we said about John Keel last week. He plays a style of rugby. If it gets results, you're not bothered. If you're in mid-table and you're not doing anything,
well, it was a bit like the scrum trap. That was a gentleman's agreement between the coaches that they wouldn't do it, and then one club broke rank, and then it just spread like a cancer.
There you go. There you go.
So,
no spirit.
No. Split of the salary cap. The salary cap. I mean, three marquee players this year.
Next year. But again, how many breaches of the salary cap have we seen? Fined or points deducted?
Documentaries made lauding the clubs. So Lee are second. They are above Wigan, who also won against Huddersfield Giants, who could get dragged into this now. Because they could lose to St Helens.
Wakefield in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's their heritage round, and as I said to everyone on the Twitter yesterday, go down with your Sheffield Eagles shirts on. Wind them up.
So Huddersfield go to Catalan, which you would think they may well struggle this weekend, and then they've got Wakefield.
With the whole new Luke Gale, Will Dagger axis of terror in the middle.
But that could, everybody's saying, we need to get to August, and it's the Wakefield Castleford game. I'm not saying Huddersfield will get dragged into this, but again, I thought it relatively odd that Ian Watson was prepared to almost praise his team not getting beaten as badly as they had the week before. And
not quite as crap as we were.
This isn't having a go at Ian Watson, and I think, again, Matty Peake got that wrong. I think it's admirable that one coach should come out in support of another, but if you honestly thought that the media would not question what is going on at Huddersfield, then, that's news value.
It's just people doing their job, isn't it?
Yeah.
It must be
and when
difficult
when
for a
Jenna
coach.
said on Sky, Justin Holbrook's being linked with these 3 jobs, and Huddersfield immediately come out and make a statement, you have to then follow that up and say, well, yeah. And against Leeds, when Ian Watson, we said this last week, gave a really honest, frank and open interview, he addressed the idea that he felt he might be under pressure, and it would be understandable if he was. So again, this week, Jake Connor's back in, suddenly he's fit.
Improved his fitness in a week.
Yeah. It's a long-term thing, but it's not quite that long-term because he's back. And again, speaking to a journalist that was at the game, wasn't brilliant.
Penalised in possession, I believe. March 10.
But again, Ian Watson defending the fact that he thought he had a pretty decent game. I don't think anything's changed with Huddersfield, and I don't think it will next week. But they really need to be looking at.
That's a huge game against Wakefield, because if Wakefield win that, they're 2 points behind Cass and potentially only.
No hubris from me, because I've seen enough bad games against Huddersfield in the past. I'm not going to get excited about that. But has there been more dissent recently? Is that something that I've just noticed on TV more than usual? So I've seen a couple of players being marched back. I don't know if it's just I've not paid attention or.
No, I don't know what the stats would be. I don't know the stats. I don't think it's any more than normal. Really.
And again, it's such a great penalty. Why other sports, particularly the round ball one, have not followed that? If you commit a foul on the edge of the area and you surround the referee and abuse him, and suddenly that becomes a penalty, why doesn't football introduce something like that?
Because people who come from countries that don't have rugby as a sport don't understand the concept. That's genuinely one of the reasons given. Even though it's not really
it's not a concept. Dissent is dissent.
But the marching forward 10 metres is a concept. So
yeah, I think it's a brilliant move. I've always thought it was brilliant.
It's a territorial game though, rugby league, isn't it? It was unlike football. So if you were to give an extra 10 metres in football, it's neither here nor there.
Unless it's in the penalty.
No, true, but that's a significant upgrade, isn't it?
Well, they could book players for dissent, which they don't seem to do.
No, I don't think it's on the increase. I just like it.
Chris is in Scarborough, watching us, loving the scarf.
Can you see the sea from where he is?
Is it? He's having fish and chips.
Well, you would if you were in
I
Scarborough.
mean, imagine that. It's July, it's sunny, you're in Scarborough watching us. I mean, what's gone wrong, Chris?
Fish and chips.
What's gone wrong? Yeah, some of these things are good, some are not good. St Helens beat Castleford 22-0, so they get to keep Tom Maguire, so that's good for Saints.
Apparently slightly more convincing than the scoreline because of the conditions. Paul Wellens really happy with his team that got back to nilling aside, but Andy Lask criticising the 6 again.
Which has been in for how many years now? 3.
I'm not sure that's the root cause of
Losing to the
problems
world
at the
champion.
moment.
He could have criticised the try because there was an obstruction on a try.
Was that the Wellesby one?
I can't remember who scored it. It was. I
It
think
was
it
a
came
big
from
gap.
a scrum. I think.
Yeah, I think Wellesby comes back inside.
The St
Although there
Helens
was a
players.
horrendous missed tackle on Wellesby.
Yeah, no, a lot. I mean, the Castleford defender didn't make much of an effort to work around that attacker. And he shouldn't have to do, by the way. But he didn't make that much of an effort to try and make the tackle. But that probably should have been no try. But nevertheless, to not score any points probably speaks volumes, doesn't it?
We did take down Wakefield earlier in the season. What's going on with Castleford?
I don't know. I don't know whether if you're going to criticise referees, I think you have to pick your game, don't you? I remember
Not the one you've lost 22
Yeah.
nil.
Well, I seem to remember Derek Beaumont having a go Chris Kendall a few years ago. And I'm not sure if I can't remember what the scoreline was, but I just thought I was amazed that he chose that game on that day to
You're
they got hammered.
Always better from the point of view of winning.
Yeah.
Say, well, we may have won, but there is a couple of things I'm not too happy with.
Congratulations to Derek, by the way, because Lee are now the world champions. Because the lineal world championship was held by Hull KR and now is Lee. So they are the world champions.
Yeah, I didn't understand that tweet. What did that mean?
So when St Helens beat Penrith, they became the lineal world champions.
The lineal.
Well, they were the actual world champions.
And they were the actual world champions.
Okay.
So when they lost to, was it Leeds? I think it was Leeds, were the first team they lost to, so they became the world champions.
Oh, I see.
Like boxing.
Right. Okay.
We could go back to 1976, but I can't be
When he
bothered.
used to play pool in the pub, it was known as winner stays on.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
I
Lee
see,
are now,
right.
Lee are now the
right.
world champions. Which if Derek finds out, he'll make a big thing about it. So that's good.
Well, Castleford's next game is at home to Lee, isn't it?
Yeah,
So again,
so they could become the world champions again because Cass won it when they beat Leeds.
but again, Cass are going into a game where if everyone is fit for Lee, that's going to be a big test.
Paul was at the Saints game. It was heavy going as a spectacle. A few decisions went against Cass, but Cass were utterly clueless in attack. There you go. So all those 6 agains that were given against them or whatever. I'm trying to get the stats.
Riley Dean made his debut. So if Riley Dean is good enough to play for Castleford and Warrington are short of a half-back while George Williams is out, rhetorical question, because
Doesn't
for
make you
Warrington fans out there, why would you not recall Riley Dean if he's good enough to play in Super League?
I love it when the first words you read about the match report are attritional. So we know exactly what Saints and Castleford was like. Just on that penalty count though, 4-5 to Cass, 6 against, 3-2 to Saints. So it's hardly as if there was, the game at Wakefield on.
I think he was suggesting it was inconsistent, so he wasn't quite sure when it was going to be given and when it wasn't given. Which
I'm not sure his team were making enough attacking threat for that to be
I just don't think people are critical sometimes of the 6 again, and there is sometimes debate around consistency of ruck offences, whether they be penalties in the old money or 6 agains. But I don't buy the argument that ultimately they lost 22-0 because of the application of 6 again.
Paul Rowley, it says, he described the performance from Salford as the worst in his 1.5 tenure. I mean, I could have not read that because I was there and I heard him say those words. He did not once blame the penalty count, which was 12-3 to Wakefield. And Salford got a 6 again, so well done to Salford on that. But as you mentioned about when Leeds went to Wakefield, I mean, it's great timing for Wakefield's performances because when Leeds went there, all the best players have gone. Salford go there, best players not on the pitch. Now, Salford weren't good, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, it's only because they missed players, but it was a good performance from Wakefield. Dagger and Gale played well together. Max Jarrett was very good. Tom Lynham saved a couple of tries, apparently. I mean, he was at the other end of the pitch, so I couldn't see it. The Flying Slug, as the Twitter feed called him. Not me. Super Wakefield, there you go. It's all good.
So have they turned a corner?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Because then they lost at Hull KR in between those. So, and they've got Wigan this Friday.
Got
Wigan
Wigan,
are quite good, aren't they? So, you pick your battles, don't you?
Well, I think that's where they're at, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to throw the towel in, by the way, against
No,
Wigan,
no.
but they won't be banking on that as a win.
No,
but I
if
think
they know they've got Huddersfield coming up the week after.
Yeah.
I mean, would
becomes
you
huge.
play Luke Gale knowing that he's probably not fully fit? Probably wouldn't. David Fafita's obviously still. Well, he is. Would you risk him in a game where you don't really need him?
I think the unsung.
But it depends how many players they've got to bring in, because they haven't got many players.
I think the unsung hero at the moment is Max Jarrett, which
He's great.
Not enough people are saying
Yeah,
his
great.
return has also sparked a little bit of revival. But he's such a good player. He reads the play really, really well. He's never been given an extended run under various coaches in what might be his favoured position at fullback. But to me, he looks very, very accomplished. And did he make the first long-range break?
Yes.
Or was it the second?
I think
try?
he was involved in one of them. Yeah.
Went on the outside of his man and.
I've-
Was it? Yeah, it was the first try. Liam Kay was in
Yeah.
support on his inside.
It
Who
was a
again
nice try, that.
needs a huge amount of credit. Liam Kay. Is there a position that he hasn't played in? There can't be too many people that
No.
sign as a fullback, play on the wing, double as a hooker, and played loose forward.
I'm a big Max Jarrett fan. I mean, the great news for the club is if they do get relegated, they've signed him up on a contract, so they could probably get 20 quid for him or whatever from whoever needs a fullback. But
I'm not sure relegation's a foregone conclusion.
oh no,
It's not. It
It's-
definitely isn't.
it's not the word momentum, because obviously momentum doesn't exist. But in the balance of things, as I said a few weeks ago, there's a lot of negativity around Castleford. Now there's a lot of negativity around Wakefield as well when they lost 12 in a row. But I think there's also when you looked at things at the start of the season, it looks like where Wakefield were going to finish was probably going to be bottom of the table. Mark Applegarth, interestingly, said in the press conference that the lesson they've learned is don't have a small squad because you need more players, and that's a problem for Salford at the minute. Paul Rowley saying in the press conference afterwards they can't bring anyone. There's no one.
One of Lee's great advantages is that they probably have the smallest squad, but they've got the most number of players that have played.
Yeah.
Ever present.
I'll say they've got away with it. That's not
No,
the
they
right
haven't.
phrase,
There are some clubs that have horrendous years with injury.
Yeah.
There are others that have a settled squad that tend not to get injured. But if you do have a small squad and it hits you, there's no way you can go.
Well, that's luck, isn't it? That's
Yeah,
really,
well,
by and large, that's down to luck.
The interesting thing was listening to some of the League players this week, because obviously they're on telly, so there's a couple of features about them, saying we don't train that much. We knew we had a small squad. We're very intense when we train. We don't train every day. And you suddenly think that's management, isn't it? That's making the best of the limited resource.
Yeah, that's been sensible, isn't it? But
Hull are a little bit the same. Hull is slightly different this year, that they used to perform brilliantly up to the halfway point and then blow up. Now they didn't perform as well in the early part of the season, but they look pretty. So you look at people like Chris Satte now and Liggy Sow, and they look stronger now than they did at the start of the season, which has to be a credit to conditioner Jason Davison, but also Tony Smith managing a squad. We know what we want to achieve at the end, because hang in there long enough, and the end is the bit that really matters. And you know, whilst Catalan clearly are a very, very good team at the moment, deservedly 4 points clear at the top. You know, Hull, who again listens to the commentary, listening to Tony Smith afterwards, acknowledged that his side were relatively fortunate to be in the game at half time. They scored two tries right on the hooter, one of which was an interception. But you've still got to be around doing that sort of stuff to put yourself in the game. The second half became a bit of a war, which is to Hull's credit. They weren't doing that when they were losing their 7 matches.
So Hull are in that little group with Leeds and Hull KR, just outside the playoffs. Salford obviously losing a game they, I won't say expected to, but they probably thought they would have done better than they would have done. Level on points with Saints, who do have that game in hand still against Huddersfield. When is that going to be played?
Well, they were running out of time, because they kept saying, "Oh, it'll be in a cup."
And now they're having to
weekend,"
move. Now they're having to move move matches to Huddersfield Town. Have decided to. Now surely they should block off those. No, of course they don't. It doesn't matter, does it?
Interesting Hull derby this weekend, though, because if Hull were to win that, and remember what happened in the first one this year when they were humiliated and embarrassed, but if they were to win, then that dynamic about on the edge of the playoffs, you know, Hull's could be at the expense of Hull KR.
Sunday lunchtime, perfect for all the clubs to stick on the telly before their matches in the Championship and League One if there aren't issues with traffic, which saw Oldham and Workington postponed. Is all the Super League? I think we mentioned everything. There wasn't any there weren't any major talking points coming out of the game. No one's, sworn at a referee or dropped something on their head deliberately or anything. So it's all a bit. Some matches happened. Some results were good. Some were not so good for other teams.
I think the element of unpredictability is still there this week, and more so for Wakefield's fantastic performance. And that's what we want. We're looking at fixtures for next week and not really knowing who the favourites are.
Friday night, Castle 8 o'clock, 7:45 Wakefield Wigan. It's 7:45 kickoffs are nice because you are finished. The coaches come in, do their bit, you go off, and you go home.
Fish and chips.
Yeah. Sean Wayne, we're booking the coaches just in case we do beat Wigan on Friday. Warrington Saints on the telly. Saturday, Catalans Huddersfield. Sunday, Hull KR Hull FC at 12 o'clock. Salford Leeds at 3. So you can watch one. You can listen on Radio Merseyside and then listen on Radio Manchester.
Published today.
150 years of the Salford Red Devils. Some of rugby's most revered names have worn the famed red jersey, including Harry Eagles, who played in every match of the inaugural British Rugby Tour to Australasia in 1888. It says on the back there.
Must be true.
I don't know if there's a picture of him on the front. Do they have photographs in 1888?
What do the stars represent?
Number of championships.
Right.
This is a great thing about sport. You can just make it up. Just have as many stars on your shirt and make up what they're for. Wait till they've got 2 because we won 2 championships. But they also have it on the women's team shirt who haven't won any championships. But it's all right because I'll say that I'm not 100% sure on that. Leeds haven't got any stars on the shirt. They've won how many? Wiggins, I think, represent World Club Challenges they've won or something. And we're stolen it from Italy, haven't we?
So
where they have
Leeds used to have flags at the top of the goalposts representing the number of times they've won the championship. But now they've got
too many
goalposts.
Yeah. At Castle, they've got no flags. No, fine. In Italy, they have a star when they win 10 Serie A titles, because there was a whole controversy when Juventus got stripped of some. So they have to take off a star, and they get a different badge for winning the cup and this and that and the other. Speaking of teams being banned, have you heard about the Drug Olympics that are going to happen? Some Australian fellas decided, right, lads, what we need to do. The Olympics, it's great, right? Higher, faster, stronger, whatever it is in French, doesn't matter. But we all know some of them not quite on the level. Well, let's just say, forget health and safety, take whatever you want.
Interesting.
The Chemical Olympics.
Yeah. So,
not
terrible idea
not
for health-wise, but as a freak show, we're all interested in freak shows. How fast can you and how long can you throw the javelin? These are the things we need to know. But thank goodness we don't have that in rugby league. Right. The championship. What a set of results happened this weekend. Batley won at Barrow by 12 points to 6.
In the last minute.
0-0 at half-time. Always love a 0-0.
But that was a late kick-off, wasn't it?
Was it the M6?
Or was it the women's that was the late kick-off? The women should have played first and they had to play afterwards.
Yeah, they kicked off on time.
Yeah, Whitehaven Fev kicked off late because of the thing, and Fev won 60-0 in that one. Oldham Workington in League 1 didn't happen because Workington got stuck. Bradford beat Keighley 74-12. And to fill with a hat-trick.
You would worry about Keighley at the moment. Now definitely dragged into a relegation battle.
Definitely, yeah.
That's a big, big loss. Not that Bradford might have put 74 points on another team, but you look again at what was the score at Keighley? Was it something like 40 points to 6 in Keighley's favour?
Heavily in Keighley's favour, yeah.
That's a massive turnaround.
And it's a big score to put on such a narrow field. I was quite impressed that a side can do that, to be honest. But yeah, I'd be concerned if I was Keighley, particularly given that Newcastle result a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, they got the win against Whitehaven. I didn't think it was entirely convincing. They never really killed the game off.
They've
got an enormous game against York this week.
And York had a tremendous result, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, after the defeat in midweek at Whitehaven, which I think was last minute as well, it was late on.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have expected them to bounce back with a win against Halifax.
And they had a few out as well.
Yeah, so very good
played
win.
3 games in a week.
For Andrew Henderson's men, 28-18 at the LNER.
Simon Grick's not impressed with his side. Very honest in his post-match analysis.
I think having said that on Keighley, that I just think there's so many teams in the mix there that it's going to go towards the end of the season, in the last probably even the last game of the season, isn't it?
But it is strange how fortunes have changed at the club. You know, the coach isn't there. Dane Chisholm now isn't there.
Don't you think that's a strange signing for Featherstone? Because they don't really
Yes.
need him.
Yeah.
And it's just an additional wage that I don't see the point of.
They lost Luke Gale, didn't they? Of course, Keighley, they signed him. He didn't play that many games, and then the captain from last year went. I think he went to Newcastle, didn't he? He certainly left the club.
Brendan Sanford. Did he go to York?
No, I'm thinking of the halfback.
Oh right.
I'm trying to remember his name. I've forgotten him. He left the club, so the halfback that they won promotion with was no longer there. They sort of signed Gale and he left. So, and then obviously they got rid of the coach. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Something just seems a bit.
So that's a game with two clubs without a permanent coach. Bradford haven't appointed a coach, have they?
No,
have I missed that?
But you can't see them. You can't see them appointing one, can you?
No.
With the way they've turned it around.
And I don't think Lee Greenwood wants the role full time, which is why he's not put his name forward. But I think, they've said to him, with Brian Noble doing your recruiting, is there any reason why we should change anything before the end of the season? No, there isn't. Carry on.
Les is here to correct me. Thanks, Les. They do need a half at Fev because Ford's injured. So there you go. London 56, Newcastle 10 on. Riley Dean went to Castle.
At Ebbsfleet.
The home of the Australian fellow who's been on the podcast from Hunslet. Damien Irvine?
Oh, right. Is he at Ebbsfleet?
Yeah. And Ebbsfleet, is it Kent?
Yes.
Yeah. Kent Victor, return home.
But interesting that they should go to Kent and got a crowd of 1,200. It's a decent crowd for London.
Maybe they should be a nomadic
Their
side.
next game is at Ebbsfleet as well.
Bit like a cricket side who travel around the area. I don't know.
And yeah, I think they're playing Toulouse at Ebbsfleet this week.
What has happened to Swinton Lions? 22-10 down at half time to Sheffield. We know we're a decent team, obviously they're fourth in the table. And then they go and win 30 points to 22. 2 wins in a row.
I spoke to their celebrity fan.
Yes.
Who was watching the cricket.
Well, he's probably got to write about it or talk about it somewhere.
Yeah, remarkable result that. I mean, although Sheffield had a strange result a few weeks ago. I'm trying to remember. Was it Whitehaven they lost at home to? So it just shows the unpredictability of the competition.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. The uncertainty around outcome, the phrase you use. It's exciting when you. I mean, it's not good if you're having a bet on the handicaps or whatever. You know what's going on here, and you go for this and that and the other. Certainly, if you bet Sheffield and you're looking at half time, you're thinking, "Well, it's all right, isn't it?" Then
Newcastle Whitehaven's a big game this week as well, isn't it? Towards the bottom end.
We're almost in last chance territory for Newcastle, I think.
Toulouse beating Widnes 40 points to 28. Toulouse, who are now homeless, thanks to the Japanese rugby union team. The French and rugby union, they
and best wishes to Luke Lacoste, who's had to step down from presidency of the French Federation for health reasons. We wish him well because he seems a good guy.
League One, that was it. Hunslet beat Doncaster. Another big result for the Hunslet.
Big result because it puts them now in the mix for playoff place. I don't think anybody other than Dewsbury will get promoted, but where you finish for your playoff places is going to be pretty crucial. And Hunslet now on the heels of Doncaster after that.
I mean, I don't know what. Obviously, I've not seen the game, but that sounds like some performance from the Hurricanes, leading at half time 16-4 and only losing by 5 points to the league leaders
late on.
Yeah.
Who only had 12 men for part of the game because Paul Sykes was in the sim.
It's one of those games
but
where
that was a brilliant performance from the Hurricanes.
I think Liam Finn made mention of some errors that he'd made in team selection.
Honest.
Yeah. But they got lucky there, Dewsbury.
It's one of those games where you think, when you see a scoreline like that at half time, you think, well, Dewsbury will run away with this in the second half because they've got the experience. They're a better team, but didn't quite happen for them, but they still got the points, which is the most important thing. As did North Wales, 32-24 over Rochdale. Rochdale now the lowest of the traditional sides in the pyramid because below them are the Hurricanes, Cornwall and London. And what a big game that is on Saturday now. This is the game you got in our league. You pay $4.95. London Scholars versus Cornwall, worst two teams in the comp. This is what you want to see. But it's not on Broncos versus Toulouse kicking off just before. They should have played that as a double header.
I don't understand.
I'm just throwing things out there.
I don't understand. I think, again, if you're looking at making a rugby league event, that there has to be... What is the point of them almost kicking off simultaneously? I think North Wales, again, are another example of a team that started the season really poorly, didn't they? Lose like first 6 games. And now they're in a playoff place and have hit some form, and are nomads themselves.
Yeah, they didn't play it. I think they played a couple of games now away from their usual
Chester
ground.
Rugby Union. And Hurricanes are at Derby this week.
Yeah. I didn't mention that on the radio, don't I? I'll have to remember that. In the Championship on Saturday, on Sunday rather, Batley Halifax, Featherstone Swinton, Keighley York, Newcastle Whitehaven and Sheffield Borough. So Keighley York, obviously the Andrew Henderson derby. So
Batley Halifax sounds really exciting, because again, Halifax need to respond. Batley have not been convincing the last couple of weeks, losing at London and just winning at Barrow. So that's a game that I'd go to.
League One.
If it wasn't magazine production.
Well, that's because I've got to write some words. I wrote some yesterday. I've done about 600.
Let's say one of the two of you has already had their page set and the other hasn't.
I did mine a couple of weeks ago. I'd get the...
I did start it and then I got distracted and I've written 600 words. I had a break on my break yesterday.
But how many of them will be in there?
Well, probably hardly any of them as usual, but some of them might be. I know one word which won't be in there, but we'll see if it makes the cut. Midlands versus Hunter in League One, Oldham North Wales and Workington versus Rochdale. Monday, it's back on the telly. Widnes Bradford in a battle of teams without coaches.
John Keir down.
They should get him on the telly.
John Keir.
Get him on the telly.
Yeah.
I'm not Viaplay, so I'm getting eating pies at half time with Emma Jones. I don't know. That's the men's rugby this week. There's no wheelchair games this week, but not in the Super League. But Leeds, London coming up on Saturday.
That'll be good.
I'm going to have to be in 2 places.
Top of the table clash.
Yeah. But might not be some people might be missing, but we'll talk about that next week.
I think there'll be at least 2 who normally are involved in the blue and amber camp, who may well be at a South West London tennis tournament.
I think they said they'd be watching London Broncos or something.
No guests of honour at Wimbledon.
The circles these people
Champions
next.
Day.
It's everyone we come into contact with goes into like these further exciting worlds, and every time I go on Instagram, young Miss Prim, she's always off bloody eating free food somewhere.
She's at some taster restaurant
Yeah,
of note.
I like the #1 podcast in Mexico.
Filming the courses.
I used to be on national radio. Phil's edited magazines and stuff and written books, and you're a referee. So.
Was.
We don't get invited to taste the menus, do we?
I really want free food. I don't thought about anything else. I want to become an influencer.
When are we doing the fish and chip challenge?
I know we need to do that again, don't we? Paul says, who is Swinton's celebrity fan? I mean, that's just disrespectful, isn't it? That's just disrespectful. The fabulous late Martin Calder.
You haven't got his book on the table, have you?
Oh, no, we haven't.
It's been usurped. Swinton's been usurped by Salford.
Yeah.
They'll never live it down.
In the Women's Super League this week, there were some big scorelines. St Helens beat Huddersfield 66-0. Huddersfield managed to find some players who haven't gone off to play for St Helens or Leeds.
Yeah, this week.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, and I understand the argument that we need to equalise the teams in the Women's Super League. But on the flip side, if a player's any good in the men's Super League who plays for, say, Wakefield, I'll use my own team as an example. Say someone's good at Wakefield, I don't know, like Tom Johnson, and then a bigger club comes in,
Like
and he thinks,
Dragons.
I know, fancy that. The challenge, because we know the players who've got the same time going for the money, or the 50 quid they get at Leeds or whatever, because people have overblown that completely. And the problem for Huddersfield is, and now I don't want to pick on Huddersfield because that's unfair. The problem for the clubs that aren't St Helens and Leeds and York and Wigan is Warrington maybe. Clubs who take things more seriously is the wrong word as well.
Less professional.
If I see, St Helens put out content, Leeds put out content, York put out obviously loads of content. But if you play at a park pitch and we can play here in a park, or you can play at the Totally Wicked Stadium. You might win something.
Might get to Wembley.
And I understand that not every club can play at their home venue. I understand that, so it's not as if I'm saying it. But
no, but it's going to be an incentive if you.
If I'm not getting paid, and I can go and not get paid here or here where things are slightly better. He says 66-0 Saints won, so that's good for them. They play Warrington this week in the Jodie Cunningham
Derby.
Emily Ridge Derby. Huddersfield play York. York having beaten Wigan 40 points to 6, warming up nicely for that semi-final against St Helens, aren't they? York. I know Tara Jesselli picked up an injury at some point in the game. Obviously, it wasn't too bad. Wigan versus Leeds. Leeds having beaten Warrington 88-0. So Caitlin Beams is back.
Wigan against Leeds this week before they meet in the Challenge Cup.
Yes. Will we learn anything from that?
Yes. You're not sure?
No, we probably will. Leeds minus 20 on the handicap for the semi-final.
NRLW first trial this week.
Did you watch the...
North Queensland with Frank Goldthorpe. Got beaten by the Gold Coast.
It's better than playing for West Tigers.
But even their pre-season friendly games are live streamed. You could have watched it.
4 quarters.
No commentary, one camera. Didn't matter. You could watch Frank Goldthorpe make her debut for... Well, not make her debut.
Her first appearance.
Her first appearance.
Sometimes no commentary is better than commentary. Great result for Lee Leopard yesterday, beating Barrow 14-0 away from home.
Went top of the league, didn't they?
Bradford beat Cass, so the Cass were winning at half-time. Keep going, Cass. 16-4 to Bradford. And Fairford beat Salford 30 points to 10. So you would have expected Featherstone to be up at the top end of the table, and they are third indeed in that division. You'd rather be in Group 2 than Group 1, and that's where you feel sorry for Huddersfield, because they've kind of, I don't think, got promoted by accident.
They've taken the poison chance.
Yeah. There aren't in... It is what it is. So that's all it is. And London Broncos beat the Army, 40 points to 10. This week it's the Cardiff Demons versus the Thurrock T-Birds.
Great name.
And the London Broncos versus the Golden Ferns. I'm assuming they're from... Are they Gloucester?
Gloucester.
What happened to the...
All goals.
And Oxford. So Oxford versus Toronto was the first... Well, they're back, of course. Not just a made-up...
Except
not just someone's bought the badge. And it's exciting news. The Wolfpack... No, they aren't coming back. They can't come back. That experiment, that thing...
That ship.
It's been and gone, I'm afraid.
Saved.
West Tigers, they're the worst team in world rugby. Of any kind. 74-0. Teams don't get beat 74-0, in there.
Well,
it's the best competition in the world.
Another one got beat 66-0.
What's going on?
It's not supposed to happen in the NRL.
Phil Gould's getting a lot of stick. We can't see it now because he's blocked it on
Has he?
He blocked us a while ago. I still don't know why.
Talking of the NRL.
Yes.
Selwyn Cobbo.
Which is a great name, isn't it? It sounds like he should be, if they do a reboot, as they say, of Last of the Summer Wine, he's one of your first names.
That's not Selwyn Compo.
No, it's first name on the list.
Did you see his match winning try? On the last tackle.
No.
That was a stroke of genius. If it's on YouTube or
I'm sure it's probably already on
NRL.com or whatever it might be, search it out.
Right.
Les says, do you already see a gap between the women's NRL and the women's Super League? It was already there before.
Yeah.
It is what it is, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, because that's going to be the case. Now, can we close that gap? Somehow, probably, but there's an interesting thing going to happen now in sport with, if money is getting tighter for everyone, and we saw with...
Unless you're Saudi Arabia.
Unless you're Saudi Arabia. I don't think they're interested in women's rugby league, I don't know. Something tells me they're not.
Culturally, that may be a problem for them.
I don't know. They're not going to be wearing any armbands, are we, in Saudi Arabia. But money's getting tight, or whatever. We saw when... I can't remember if it was Walsall Worcester when they went to the wall. The women's team, no. We're not bringing them back. No. So, for all these sports and teams, the Netball Super League went without a sponsor this year. I noted on their coverage at the end of the year, so that's a financial hole to plug. I don't know how much money's in netball. I assume not much. But it is going to be interesting to see. And we've seen it in football with Reading getting rid of their women's, not getting rid of them, but going from paying them to not paying them. It's going to be interesting to see if there is a cut in money. And I know foundations are more involved in the women's game than the club side of things. But it's going to be interesting to see how, if there is any squeeze on money, how that affects everything that isn't the men's Super League. Not saying it's right or wrong. I can understand why it will happen if it does happen. But we do have an opportunity with everything that is new after the World Cup. We've seen the numbers about, obviously the main headlines came out where RFL loses loads of money. But the increase in participation numbers in the various forms of the game that aren't the men's Super League are positives for the sport. The LTA banging onto 10% of the nation pick up a tennis racket every year, and then they put it down again straight after Wimbledon. But people are actually going out and playing these variants of the sport, and maybe one day in the future we can make some money out of it. Everyone can make some money out of it, but I don't know. Oh, Les has missed bits of the programme. It's supposed to be working. Les, what are you doing? Another poll. How many polls have we got watching the programme? T-Birds are also one of the main rugby union women's teams in the London Essex area. So it's the summer, their season's over. It was interesting when they did the PR stuff on, they've changed the name of the women's rugby union competition, and they were talking about it being sustainable and things. I'm thinking, interesting choice of word there. The NRLW could be, for rugby league, one of the biggest things we've got. Because it could be, if it isn't already, the biggest women's rugby competition in the world, club rugby competition.
But I like the way that they built it, which is slowly and sustainably. So that even state of origin, one game, big game, crowds up to 10,000, make it 2 games. Some consternation that the winner is an aggregate. Didn't matter. 2 fantastic games between 2 teams that were very, very close. In the end, it was 1 on points difference. They're talking about 2025, it'll be 3 games. But they haven't gone straight to 3 games. The NRLW competition, it was 4 teams to start with, then it was 6, now it's 10. It's building in such a way that you'd think it is going to be a major plank of, if clubs are live streaming their women's games as friendlies, and we're watching them over here, that's a saleable product. That has a commercial value.
Agree, and I don't know why they introduced a Super League 2. I don't know how you can have a Super League 1 and a Super League 2. I think that just devalues.
Well, I think the problem was they went too quickly with Super League having X number of teams in there that you can't row back and say, actually no, we'll get rid of these teams and call them the Championship now because you've already called it Super League. So.
But that was obvious because there's not a huge number of women playing the sport. It's growing.
Gone up 6%.
Exactly.
Yeah,
in 10,
it's great.
15 years,
It's great.
it might be,
but as you say, if you adopt the NRL model and you gradually improve it, and then you don't have your players, at 2 clubs or now 3 clubs or whatever it may be.
But also, you've got other clubs now wanting to be part of it who are being told you can't just come in. You've got to have a certain standard bar that you've got to hit. So if you are, I don't know. Let's think of a team that probably North Sydney, and you want to be in the Women's Super League. You know that you can't just apply. The 10 teams are in there are absolutely elite. Well, what is your development path? How many players have you got playing? At what standard are your players playing? How much, money have you got to put into your salary? Whereas because we need teams to make a division look like it's bigger than it is. Would you say, yeah, come in, we're not paying you anything, you don't need to lodge anything, you don't need to have a certain number of people playing, but we'll call you a Super League team if you we need to look at a proper development pathway. Cardiff have been a great success this year. They're not ready probably to play week in, week out against a St Helens or a York, but they probably could hold their own with Huddersfield or Warrington.
There's supposed to be a team coming up, isn't there, from the south into the national competition next year. I think we just have an opportunity where there might be different audiences for wheelchair rugby league and women's rugby league to men's rugby league. We've seen with women's football seems to have a different audience to men's football. There could be different audiences out there, which means different sponsors, this and that. I guess it's good that we have a sponsor who's willing to put their name to 3 competitions. How financially good that is for the sport, I don't know, but it's better than not having a sponsor at all. So at least you get, and you turn on the TV, it's out there for Betfred, and there's Courtney Winfield Hill holding the trophy up, and you think, how did this happen? This wasn't the way it was 5 years ago when we were at Warrington, and you're having an argument with some people in the reception at the Albert Jones. Coming up to the anniversary of that, so that's my career. That's the.
You should have filmed the argument in reception.
That was the highlight of my career. And it's just all no disrespect, all downhill since then. Has anything else happened? I feel like there's no need for us to just talk about stuff that hasn't happened. Lee Bradford, yeah, he's gone. He's gone to Rugby. He's gone back to Rugby.
Northampton Saints.
So he was going to Samoa, supposedly. Everybody said, and suddenly he hasn't.
He was going to the NRL, wasn't he? He did a trip out there and was going to be an assistant. But no, another one that's in the defensive ranks of rugby union. I can see why he might want to, but I don't know why. I just think it's a waste.
But where do you find him a job? I know there's a letter in the paper that talks about people leaving. Where is it? Not the letter.
Is this one of your letters?
No. I've had an idea for one that I might send him. But something about rugby union, but I can't find it now. Oh, here it is. It's Bob Dainton from the mighty city of Wakefield. I'm very sorry, but it still hurts, he says. We dedicated rugby league fans can't help but feel betrayed by the likes of Sean Edwards, Andy Farrell, and now even everybody's rugby league hero, the great Kevin Sinfield. I don't blame them, and I know they're leaving us for what they know is an inferior game. Come on, Bob. And at the end of their career, they have to look to topping up their pension fund. To me, it just shows the difference between the games when rugby union is still prepared to pay them good money, knowing full well that rugby league has had the best of them. Well, I mean, we go to the latter point. Where do we can't just find a job for Lee Radford because he used to play rugby league and coach in Super League.
The reality is it's a small pool, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a small pool of opportunity for you to. If you're going to be a coach, where do you coach? Well, there's 12 teams in Super League. If you don't want to go into the Championship, and if you can't get or you don't want to go to Australia, then the next best is
that you probably coached at least 2 of those Super League teams, so they're not going to have you back.
No. So
I mean, I've no idea how much Sean Edwards gets paid by the French Rugby Union or Kevin Sinfield gets paid by the RFU or Andy Farrell gets paid by the IRU.
Wheelbarrows full.
We haven't got those wheelbarrows because there's a little hole in the wheelbarrow, unfortunately. But
in our bucket.
It's just how it is. But we can't keep people where they don't want to be because there's a better offer on the table for them. And you can't blame anyone for doing that.
No, it's not just pensions; it's actually salaries. Like I don't know how old Lee Radford is, but it's not talking about pensions.
We should treat it as, I mean, we joke, we think he's wasted and all that. But actually, it is a huge compliment that rugby union again is coming to us for expertise and advice, particularly as his defensive coach, which is
stand there. Don't run into that ball.
Move in a line, tackle, move back, move in a line, tackle,
kick it.
Immediately improves them.
Yeah. I mean, we do. We all obviously hope that none of them win the World Cup.
I mean, it would be nice.
No one wins the World Cup.
If Samoa, are going to be playing more regularly, and it can fit in, it probably won't because once he's at Northampton, it's a winter sport. Yeah. And it would be nice to think that if they came over here on a tour, that he could still be an assistant or whatever. But
we're not losing players much anymore, are we? We kept Tom Johnson in the sport. I know Regan Grace went, but he's got injured. So, but we're not having that drain of players, coaches. They come and go.
Well, because I think if you're going to move and do a different competition, you move to the NRL, don't you? Because it's a far easier transition than playing the same sport than trying your hand at a different one. But looking at some of the salaries that some of those players are on in that top 100 list that came out, it's they're big figures.
We're not comparing like
that. The idea of trying to keep hold of some of our talent, even with a third marquee player, it's just not sustainable, is it?
No. Although, presumably, he hasn't been around Northampton. But that's another story.
Is it worse than Coventry? Because obviously there was the big debate in the World Cup.
I lived for a while in Wellingborough, which is on the edge of Northampton. He'll find there isn't that much to do.
Silverstone near there, is that
Yes, Silverstone.
So
is it- Greyhounds.
Is it better or worse than Castleford or Hull?
Well, I mean, obviously, from the other side
What
of the common.
things to do?
Well, I'm just trying to get you in trouble on
They've got a theatre. That's about it.
Culture.
Oundle, the famous school, is on the edge.
When I'm talking about politics, it was interesting to see one candidate in an upcoming by-election, in their video, the first thing they say is, I'm a Hull KR supporter.
I hope they were standing in the Hull ward.
No. But, I don't know. Talk about teamwork and stuff and all that. Do you ever fancy refereeing another sport?
No, I'm not particularly sporty at all, really, and I don't watch that much of the sport. So, no, I didn't really.
Well, a perfect way to end the programme.
Well, there is one big event that we haven't mentioned.
All right, go on.
Because it's not till tomorrow. Today being Monday.
Right,
For those who are
I'm going to. It's going to be something I've forgotten or something that I don't know about.
I know. I think
Somebody's birthday.
Oh, it's James's birthday. I can't
Well,
sing the
not
song.
just any birthday.
Yeah.
It's a significant birthday.
Welcome to the club. Well, tomorrow.
Thank you. I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Cards and cake sent to 4022
Care of.
Philip Howard Books, Street Lane, Leeds. They'll find us. I'm sure if you put them on there, they'll find us. Because there's nothing else to talk. We've done everything, haven't we? There's no point talking about things. There's nothing else to talk about. Are we back next week?
I don't see why not.
To celebrate the glory of the new magazine, which will be finished. It won't be out, maybe finished. Write some more words. And London, if anyone's going to London Scholars Cornwall, report back. If you can report back on that game.
Steve Maskell will be going.
I wonder what he's got back. Can we get some Cornwall? Why is he not getting Cornwall shirts to sell?
Maybe we will after Saturday.
Some London Scholars shirts or something. I still want an Oxford shirt, but I was promised one. But like many things, the promise never came off. If I was a former England women's international and on the telly, I'd have Oxford shirts coming out of my ears. That's the other thing about getting old. Hair growing out. We're done. I better end. See you tomorrow.
Something for you to look for.
No, I know.
Hair growing out your ears.